Is this thing on? Anybody there? Oh, there you are. What are you doing all the way over there? Come take a walk with me. What's up, Dream Builder? Casanova Brooks here, and today I'm gonna be sharing with you all my journey of how I went from inner city kid, south side of Chicago, to battling stage 4 cancer, to losing my mom, my job, and my home all within a matter of 2.5 weeks, to building multiple 7-figure businesses and becoming a millionaire before the age of 32. This is my journey. Come take a walk with me. Now, I grew up in one of the roughest neighborhoods in Chicago on the southeast side and what's most known as Terratown. My street was 78th and Essex, and for anybody who knows that area, they'll tell you right away, there's a lot of gangs, there's a lot of killing, there's a lot of drugs that go on in that area. For me growing up, I was very fortunate that my mom had relationships with the elders and the OGs, because there was multiple times where there was drive-by shootings, or there was fights, or there was things that 8, 9-year-old kids should not be privy to. And I did see some of those things, but also at other times, I remember they would tell me, hey, Cass, I need you to get up off of this corner right now. We don't know what's about to go down, but we do know that there's people, there's cars that we're seeing that aren't from here, so I'm gonna need you to get up off of this corner. And so as that started to progress, and as that really became my environment, my grandma started to say, hey, I gotta get him up out of here. And I'll tell you, my dad was never in my life. He is from Chicago. Last I knew, he was still alive, but I grew up as an only child. I had no older brothers or sisters, so nobody to really guide me and steer the path for where I was supposed to go. I was just a young boy with big dreams, but I was easily able to be swayed because I had no foundation. And so from there, my grandma stepped in early to be that foundation and to say, hey, you got to keep your head on straight. I got to, make sure that you have a path out of here. So she wound up moving me to Sioux City, Iowa. Now, as you can imagine, this was a huge culture change for me, right? I went from seeing only people who look like me to now all of a sudden I'm in a town of 80,000 people, cornfield, cattle, which I'd never seen before, to seeing almost nobody who looks like me. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? But I always say that there's a silver lining in everything. And that silver lining really gave me the mindset that just because you didn't look like me didn't mean that you couldn't be with me and that you had to be against me. And that was very important because it gave me the foundation for who I am today in terms of being able to build relationships and walk into any room and being able to make sure that I could add value, or I could at least hold my own in that room, regardless of the status or the wealth or whatever someone had. And so I learned that at an early age. I always say that Chicago gave me street smarts, right? But as I got older and I got to Iowa, it gave me more book smarts. So I was able to combine the two to understand where I was, but at the same time, having the knowledge to be able to communicate with whoever, wherever I was. Now, I'm in Iowa, I'm finished off middle school, I'm in high school, and I'm starting to get into activities. I'm basketball, football, dance squad, track. Things are going well for me. Everything is starting to look up, and I'm really just kind of settling into my environment. And at this time, I'm a sophomore in high school, and I probably go through my second biggest stint of adversity. For those who don't know, my first probably biggest storm was when I was 10 years old. While I was still living in Chicago, my two best friends, who we did everything together, they called us the Three Musketeers. They came over and they said, hey, we're about to go to the beach. You want to take this ride with us? And for whatever reason, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna sit this out. And it was on a Sunday morning, and we were actually supposed to be going to church, but they decided, hey, no, we're gonna go to the beach instead. And what's crazy is one of my best friends, his name was Archie, he lived right next door to me. His grandfather was the pastor at the church. So it was my house, his house, and then the church was right there on the corner next to us. So it was super crazy, but they were like, you know what? Nope, we actually gonna go to the beach. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna sit this one out. Well, come to find out, a couple hours later, they both wound up drowning off of the pier trying to surf. Now, while I wasn't right there with them doing everything that they were doing, which would have been normal routine, I always just say, God, my creator, someone had a bigger purpose for my life. And so I was very fortunate that, I wasn't right there with them, and I'm still here with you here today. Now, going back to my second storm, I'm sophomore in high school, basketball, football, dance squad, track, all of the activities. And football, I'd always played football since my 7th grade year. And for me, I was always a little guy, but I hated getting hit. I loved to hit. They would call me like a little honey badger. I tell you, I was always hitting. And so my sophomore year though, I decided like, man, I'm probably not going to the league. Right? Like I'm a little guy. I'm not, in the weight room all the time. Like football, it just isn't it for me. On top of that, when we started football, it was middle of August. And so it's hot, right? Real hot. You're putting on the helmet, you're putting on the pads. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm over this. So I wound up leaving, and then, I was just going to get ready for basketball. So basketball starts up. We're about a weekend, and we're conditioning. And I just find myself as I'm walking through the hallways, there's just a hard time for me to breathe. Like I'm taking these steps, but it's harder for me to gasp air. And so I tell my partners, and they just like, yeah, you know what? It's probably because, you left football early, basketball is just starting up. You're probably just out of shape. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. So then I was going home and I was just taking naps. And my mom's like, what's up with you? And I'm like, I don't really know. I'm tired. And so she's like, okay, well, if it persists, we're going to go to the emergency room. We wound up going to the emergency room after school one day. And so my mom tells them about the breathing. So of course, when it's breathing, and especially when you're a young child, at this time, I'm 15 years old. And so they're like, you know what? We're actually going to keep you overnight. We're going to run some tests. And so it's like, okay, fine. I'm thinking that, I get a hot nurse. That was all I saw on TV, right? When you're watching those commercials or when you're watching TV shows, you always get the hot nurse or a sponge bath. That's what I thought I was going to get. And then video games and some ice cream. And no sweat, I'll be back at school tomorrow and it'll be nothing. So I remember they came in though. It was around 11 o'clock at night. And they said, hey, you know what? We actually think it might be a little bit more serious. So we got some public transportation that should be here in an hour or so. And we're going to ship you guys to the other side of the state at the University of Iowa. And I just remember my mom being like, whoa, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, we think it might be a little bit more serious. And my mom's like, what's more serious? We think he might have cancer. And it was like, whoa. And so from that moment, I just remember my grandma kind of freaking out a little bit, and I still didn't know what to really make of it. And so it's like, okay, well, we'll go through it. We'll just see what they say. So I found myself on the other side of the state, wake up at 8 a.m. the next morning, and they're running all these series of tests. And the doctor comes back later on that afternoon, and they say, yeah, we've concluded our tests, and we actually think that, it might be a little bit more severe than we originally thought. My mom's like, well, what's more severe? And they're like, we think he might have stage 4. There's only 5 stages, which the 5th stage is really death. So what I found was that I had stage 4 lymphoma cancer. They put an emergency port in my chest. It was connected to my jugular vein. And for the next 2 years, I went through chemotherapy, dyes, pills, bone marrow. And so I remember going through all of that time, and it was definitely devastating for me because there were so many things that I wanted to do in my golden years. I was a teen. Now it went from me being able to go to the parties after school to I had to go to the cancer center with my mom to get a treatment done. And not only that, it wasn't just over when it was over, because later on that night you wouldn't feel very well, or the next day you wouldn't feel well. Then it meant you missed school or you were really tired in class. And so people could see that my energy, everything had changed. And so it felt like in those years I went from Victor, where I was a normal, popular kid, to victim. Thankfully, I did those 2 years, my mom and grandma by my side, and actually even my wife now was by my side at this time. And we were just in high school at that time, of course. I remember though, when the doctor came and told my mom and grandma that I was in remission and I could finally go home and not have to worry about any more drugs, any more treatments. I remember looking at my mom and grandma and saying, hey, I gotta be honest though, if it ever comes back, I'm going out comfort care style. And that was a big deal for me because at that time, my body had been through so much. Now, of course, in today's world, I have a son who's 13 years old. I have a daughter who at this time, she's 6 years old, about to be 7. And I got a wife. I got a family who depends on me. So of course, it's all changed now. But at that time, it was too much for me to handle, especially with only being 17 years old. So from there, I wound up graduating high school, I go off to college, University of Iowa. I went there primarily because that was where my physician was when I went through the chemo. So my mindset was, if any time that it ever came back, I would already have a doctor that knew my records, that the hospital that helped me beat it once. And if I needed to, I could beat it again. I went to University of Iowa, and remember, I still had no direction in life, right? So I didn't know what I was gonna major in. I didn't know what I was gonna do with my life. And to be honest with you, I really only went to college because I had so many people that asked me the questions second half of my senior year of, Cass, you've now beat cancer, you've defeated it, you're a victor again, right? What are you gonna do now? Right? That's a secret question that everybody asks. And for me, I didn't know. So I felt like the next best thing to do was to say, okay, I'm going to go to college. And I knew that I was smart enough to get in, and I'd done enough extracurricular things that I could go, and I needed a path. So that was what I did. So I wound up going to University of Iowa. But like I said, I was really in a state of, I didn't know what I was gonna do. So with that being said, I changed my major 4 times in 3 years. I went from computer science to business to pharmaceutical sales to communications. And when I got to communications, my only thought was I just needed that piece of paper. But even in my junior year, as I was exploring so many things, I had the mindset that just because you had a degree did not mean you were going to be successful in life. And so I was like, man, you know what? I don't know that this is even really what I want to do. And so I remember calling up my mom and grandma, and I say, hey, you know what? I don't want to do this school thing anymore. Now, they didn't really know that a partner of mine was pursuing music at this time as well. And I had a cousin who was a hood legend in music. His name was Baby Drew. Shout out to Baby Drew up in Milwaukee. And he had done songs with Bun B, Webby, Pimp C, Cuckoo Cow, a lot of the people that at the time, they were huge in the hip hop scene. So I remember calling him up, and I said, hey, you know, we got some fire tracks. We want to, you know, take this thing mainstream. And he was like, all right, just send them over to me. And I don't think he really believed that we had the talent that we had. I remember him calling me back a few days later and say, hey, y'all actually, you know, y'all got some talent. He said, the only problem is it sounds like y'all been recording this in a closet. And I remember we just started busting up laughing, but it was like, yeah, we had, because we worked with what we had and we just tried to make whatever work. And he was like, look, here's what I'll tell you. If you could find your way up here to Milwaukee, I'll put you in a professional studio and you can make your tracks there and we'll go from there. Right when he told me that, it was bingo, we got action. So I wound up calling my mom and grandma, telling them, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't tell them about the play of going up to Milwaukee, but I did tell them that I didn't want to do school anymore. And so I remember telling my mom first, and my mom was like, okay, well, here's what I'll tell you. You got to explain that to your grandma. And I was like, oh man, like I didn't want to tell my grandma because she had put so much energy, money, effort, faith into me being able to graduate because nobody else had did it. And I was like, oh man. And so I told her, and you know, to my surprise, she was like, okay, like that's fine. I'll support you. You just got to come home, you got to get a job, and you got to figure it out. And so I was like, okay. So right from there, when I hung up, it was like a breath of fresh air. And I remember we then looked up Greyhound tickets. We booked 2 Greyhound tickets up to Milwaukee, took our student loan money, withdrew from those classes. We was on our way to become, you know, superstars in music. So then we finish off, we get the tracks, and then we decide we're gonna come back home and we're gonna start a clothing brand. Because at this time, Ludacris, a couple other artists as well, they were selling, you know, CDs, hats, shirts, all out of the trunk of their car. That's how they were making it. So that was gonna be our path. And we got home and we had some friends that bought some shirts for us. And what's crazy about this is I had one of my best friends, who's still my best friend to this day. He was in the military and he was stationed over in Nepal. I told him about the idea. He's like, man, we got people in these sweatshops. Like I pass them by every day. If you need me to, I'll talk to them and see if I can get you a hookup. And so he did that. And then he actually even fronted us the money for us to be able to get the shirts. And we were essentially going to sell the shirts and then pay him back his money with some interest, which all of that worked out. We sold the shirts, we paid him back. But that was crazy because it was drop shipping before we all really knew the term drop shipping, which is so popular nowadays. But fast forward, we're back home. I'm trying to figure out life. I'm now back with Julie. She leaves college and we're trying to make this thing work together. And I started to have to get jobs now. But I'll tell you, there's so much more to my journey because I tried to be a MLB or MLG. I tried to be a gamer, right? So shout out to all the gamers out there because it's a totally different world nowadays. But I tried to be a gamer. That was very fun. That was very interesting. But at the time, it wasn't a creator economy. It wasn't a gaming economy. And so I tried my hand at that, but I couldn't really make any real money. I sold just about everything besides Coke and crack. Like, if you can think about it, I sold it. From Jordan shoes to I played poker for a living for 2 years. I had my hand at everything. And I'll tell you, I just wanted to try to figure out how to turn a dollar and a dream into a reality. That was really all it was for me. And so as I continued to try different things, selling cars, I was crushing it at everything that I was doing. But I still hadn't figured out what was the thing for me. So now at this time we have CJ, he's 2 years old and selling cars. And at the side, I'm also serving tables. And I learned because of a small stint that I did with network marketing that I was trading my time for money. I couldn't sell a car if I wasn't at the dealership. And so that was something that I was like, okay, I gotta figure this out. So now at this point, we decide we're gonna move down to Omaha. And the reason behind that is we thought, okay, we wanted more opportunities. We wanted more things to be able to do. And we thought, okay, let's see if we can make Omaha work. If it's still not big enough and we still don't have the opportunities that we want, then we'll move down to somewhere like Kansas City, where it's a little bit warmer, it has, more diversity. So it's like, okay, that's what we'll do if Omaha is still not big enough. But Omaha wound up, being a place that we lived for 9 years. And now we live down in Dallas. But I'll tell you, Omaha, it really showed us what community was about. It was everything for us. So now I'm working a corporate job in Omaha. I am a digital marketing consultant. I knew nothing about digital marketing. Just like before I got into cars, I knew nothing about that. Just like before I started serving tables, I knew nothing about that. Just like everything else, I knew nothing about it. I just decided I was going to do it because I got an opportunity to do it. And so within 9 months, I wound up finishing number 8 in the entire company out of about 540 inside sales reps. I qualified for a all expenses paid trip in Punta Cana, which at that time, Julia and I had just got married. And so we wound up using that as our honeymoon. And so that was a good time. And from there, I wanted to try my hand at management. I'm getting older. I wanted to set my sights on something bigger, better, and more challenging. And I just remember, the manager, the directors, they're like, Casanova, you haven't been here long enough. Just keep working, keep grinding. Even though my face is plastered all over, the second floor, which it was probably 15,000 square feet. It was a really big space. And they have me doing emergent leader programs and all these other things, teaching other people how to do what I do. And that was the first time that it kind of dawned on me that in the corporate environment, at least for my situation, it felt like nobody could tell you yes, but everyone could tell you no. So then when I went home, I would start looking at YouTube and I would start trying to figure out, okay, how do I take control of my own time? How do I take control of my own freedom? And that was when I wound up coming across the video where a real estate developer, he had said, you got to find a way to be the Lord of your land. Why? Because he or she who owns the land makes the rules. And I was like, oh man, that's what I needed to do. I needed to figure out, how do I become the Lord of my land? And so I was like, yeah. And growing up, my favorite TV show was always VH1's The Fabulous Life of. And they would always show these big houses and everything. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm gonna have one day. On top of that, my favorite game growing up was always Monopoly. So I was like, oh yeah, you land on my property, you gotta pay me. And so I was like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. But then after about a day or two, that excitement wore off, and it was like, well, how the hell do I become the Lord of my land, right? I didn't know anything about real estate. Nobody in my family ever owned land, house, car, business, nothing. So I was like, okay, well, how am I going to do it? So I went back and I looked deeper into his story. And he started out, he was a felon, but then he became a real estate agent. Then he became an investor, a developer. And I was like, okay, like I could do that. Like I don't know anything about owning real estate, but I do know how to build relationships. How about I just serve other people? I help them buy, sell, and invest. And in returns, I'll take the commissions, I'll buy my own property, and that's how I'll become the Lord of my land. Bingo, we got action. And it was like, okay, great. So then I set out over the next 45 days. I figured out what did I need to do to be able to get my real estate license over the next 3 months. I get this real estate license and I'm like, boom, off to the races. That's what my mindset is. So now that I got this real estate license, I knew that I was not going to be able to build my career in real estate sitting inside of a cubicle 9 to 5 all day. So I was like, okay, I got to get up out of here. So then I wound up getting an outside sales job, and this was working for a payroll company. So my mindset is I would walk up to, let's call Mr. Johnson. He's a business owner. And I would say, hey, Mr. Johnson, you know anybody looking for help with their payroll, or do you need help with your payroll? He says, no. Okay, no worries. You know anybody looking to buy or sell or invest in the real estate? Basically, I was going to be that jack of all trades, and I could help you with whatever you needed. So that was my thought. So I was going to double dutch it, and work 2 careers until my real estate, picked up enough to where then I could let go of the corporate life. And so around the same time, my mom and grandma, this was right after I got the job. So within 2 weeks of getting the payroll job, I got this real estate license. I haven't done anything with it yet. My mom and grandma call me up and they say, hey, you know what? We want to move to Omaha to be closer to you, Julie, and CJ. There's nothing left here in Sioux City for us. And I was like, okay, cool. So we wound up saying we're going to move down, or we're going to move my parents down there. And so within a couple weeks, we moved my mom and grandma down to Omaha. Within 24 hours, my mom winds up going to the hospital in Omaha. Within 1 week's time, I lose my mom at that hospital. Subsequently, over the next 2 weeks, I also wound up losing my job and my home. And there's a crazy story behind that. But so what that taught me was that I was going to need to make another way. And I'll tell you, I was going to go back after losing everything to get another W-2 job and just start all over. But my wife was like, no, you got this real estate license. You've done nothing with it. You're either going to jump all in, you're going to make something shake, or you're going to always be wondering what if. And you know how that goes. So fast forward, within that next 9 months, I did 46 deals worth $8 million in volume. I got the Rookie of the Year in Nebraska, and that's where my journey started to take off from. Now, I'll tell you, when I first got into real estate, a lot of people always ask me, like, how was I building my business? Well, the one thing I knew was that I didn't want to cold call. I wanted to be in front of people. And this goes for any type of business. I always wanted to be able to get out, network, let people see my true energy, my true passion, and who I really was. And so I was doing 3 to 5 coffee and lunches every single week. And I was meeting anybody that I could, because I understood that everybody was a potential lead or prospect for me in real estate. And even if they weren't the person that was looking to buy, sell, or invest in the next 12 months, they knew someone who was. And so anybody could become a referral source for me. And so I was just going to build my relationships and build my network. So then my name was always being thrown around whenever anybody was talking about real estate. So I started to educate myself on Bigger Pockets, other forums out there that could teach me about how do I be different in the world of real estate investing? How did I understand about getting flip properties or the BRRRR strategy and all these things? I was then bringing it back to friends and I was bringing it back to clients. And so that made me different. That gave me another leg to talk about. If someone says, hey, you know what? We just bought our house 18 months ago, right? We just bought our house 6 months ago. Because then it's like, okay, well, we don't have anything to talk about. But if I'm telling them about how I'm flipping a house, or I'm helping a client flip a house, or I just helped somebody, buy a duplex or a fourplex so they can, rent that out and make more passive income. All those things really worked in my favor of being able to be different. One of the things that my broker told me early on was money flows to the different, not to the similar. So I always try to figure out, how do I be different? So now I'm having success. I'm selling property. I have, buyers and sellers that are reaching out to me. I'm doing digital marketing because I'm using Facebook, I'm using Google, I'm using all of the things that allow me to be able to share my difference, right? After we had lost my mom, my job, and my home, we didn't have anywhere else to go because we signed a lease off on our house to be out. And so her aunt, who was going through a divorce, she said, hey, you guys can come live in my basement and, you know, stay there until you can get on your feet. And then from there, I was out just hustling, grinding, trying to make a way to figure my life out. Well, what's crazy is as we were, you know, getting on our feet, people didn't know that we were staying in an unfurnished utility room. There was our bed, there was our dresser, there was a water heater, and there was a furnace. And it was concrete walls all around it. But we gave CJ the bedroom, so we didn't have anywhere else to sleep unless we were just gonna sleep in the open space. So that was where we were living while I was helping other people buy $300,000, $400,000 houses. And we were going home and I was sleeping next to a furnace and a water heater. So crazy part of the story, but I always just believed that, again, whatever that current situation was never going to be my final destination. I knew that I was almost there. I just had to keep pushing. So along that journey, first off, we buy our first house. So we wound up building our house, and it was just like the house that was on the vision board. So when people tell me the law of attraction is not real, I definitely believe that it is, and you can manifest anything you want in this world. So we also wound up buying some flip houses, rental properties that we have, Airbnb, and all of the while, I'm also helping friends do the same thing. Now, for our journey of what I did, I wound up buying my personal property, and then we wound up selling that house for $190,000. We made about $70,000 off of it. We used those proceeds to then be the down payment on a house that we built. We built this house for $405,000. Now we've sold that house for $600,000. So after we built this house, we obviously stayed in it for a couple years, and we wound up building equity in this house. So we took out a HELOC, and at this time we had a daycare center as well. We still have that daycare center, and we were leasing a space. That's for a whole nother video, so stay tuned on that as well. But we were leasing a space, and then it came time after 2 years that we wanted to buy a spot. So we wound up finding a building. We purchased this building. It was listed for $2.9 million. We wound up getting it for $2.2 million because of how long it is set on the market. And so we purchased that with the HELOC that we got. Now we owe about $1.9 million on it. It's worth probably $2.9 to $3 million. And then we also have another real estate building, which we were able to take out leverage on that one and get another property as well. So that, in a nutshell, is how I've been able to build my wealth primarily through real estate. Now, I'm just having a lot of fun. So I wanted to share my story, my journey with each and every one of you all to be able to understand what a dream can do for you. Whenever anybody ever asks me, like, what kept me going, I always say the power of a dream. I believe that everybody has a dream. And those of us who dare to continue to dream while the rest of the world is settling for what society tells us or deems is our reality, we're the ones who stand to be trailblazers, change makers, and ultimately we make this world a better place. And so for me, on my journey, I'm so blessed that I was able to find real estate, that I was able to build a lot of relationships through real estate. I absolutely love real estate. But then also it taught me about marketing. It taught me about leverage. It taught me about so many other things that I've carried into my other businesses as well. And so I'm excited. We're going to use this as the video for you all to be able to understand who I am. At the end of the day, I'm a relationship builder. I've been able to build relationships with some of the biggest names in the world, and I don't take that for granted. And now I want to be able to share more of my wisdom, more of my insights with you all. So I pray you stay with me throughout this journey where I'm going to be sharing life lessons, real estate tips, and also business growth. Everything that I'm learning to be able to empower my family, but also empower dream builders just like you. So I appreciate you watching. And remember, in the dream we trust, but you got to take action on something. Because otherwise, that dream that you have, and we all have a dream, without any action, it'll only merely be a fantasy. That's all for this one. I'll catch you on the next one.